Here we go.
Okay. Thank you all for those of you who've joined us for this webinar. Thank you very much for being here. We are very excited to actually be speaking on this webinar, and for a few points just to go through. We are all part of WISER, which is an NSF IUCRC, and WISER stands for Weather Innovation and Smart Energy and Resilience. But in summary, basically, WISER is weather analysis for the energy industry. We are also going to be speaking about part of WISER, which is the North American forecasting model for outage, damage, and load. And we will actually go through this, and my colleagues, Adam and Zach, will be discussing this. But just as a preface, over the last few years, we've all become aware and seen the headlines that extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and severe, and they're straining the electric grid at an all-time high. So it's really our discussion here is to actually how we can adapt, prepare, and to manage some of these dynamics. We are, and that's exactly what brings us here today, which is, again, the North American forecasting model. It's an incredible, first of its kind initiative backed by NSF, thank you, NSF, and spearheaded by both UAlbany and Yukon and 12 energy industry members from WISER. So before we go into this, just some logistics. Uh, you can ask questions through the Q&A button during the presentation. And if you look, it's at the bottom. I believe it's at the bottom, or you may have to hit the three dots, but there should be a Q&A button available at the bottom of the Zoom interface. And so we will have breaks for questions, but we may also take questions during the presentation. So if you have questions, please be sure to put them into the Q&A, and we will make every effort to answer them. Um, and now, to walk us through how the model works and what it means for the future of the energy industry, we have two driving forces in the industry, and I'd like to announce them. It's Adam Helman and Zach Butcher. So Adam's with Avangrid, and Zach is with National Grid. And Adam, do you mind introducing yourself briefly, and then we can pass it to Zach?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks, Jan. Adam Helman, I'm the Senior Director of Emergency Management at Avangrid. So my day-to-day role is overseeing our emergency management program here at Avangrid, as well as our forecasting services and outage prediction modeling services. Emergency management at Avangrid is really there to ensure that we're ready to respond to any emergency, but as most utilities, and especially as utilities in the Northeast, we see severe weather far more often than our other threat profiles, but excited to be here. I also co-chair WISER's Industry Advisory Board. So excited. Thanks, Jen.
Great. Thank you, Adam. And Zach can.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I guess maybe good morning to any folks we have joined us from the West Coast. Can't forget about them. My name is Zach Butcher, Lead Director, Transmission and Distribution Operations at National Grid. Been with Grid about 16 years, the vast majority of that time in operations. And our team here is responsible for building, maintaining, operating a large-scale transmission and distribution network across the vast majority of upstate New York, including managing our emergency and storm response when the time arises. So excited to be here with everybody today.
Very good. Thank you. So actually, just so that we are all kind of set for the agenda, Adam and Zach are going to go through both the new energy industry reality as well as the WISER North American forecasting model for outage, damage, and load, and then a little bit on what WISER is at the end. So we're kind of doing the exciting things first. And then at the very end, we'll talk about membership benefits. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. So the $1,000,000 guess, right? Talk about the problem and frame this up a little bit. So maybe a little bit of tongue in cheek there with the $1,000,000 guess, right? But early in the presentation, had to hook everybody in somehow. But it's a way to kind of describe how a utility makes decisions on storm prep, but certainly holds some truth to it. I think obviously for everyone on the call, there's more than guessing that goes into getting the planning and potential pre-staging decisions right before a storm. Things like detailed weather forecasting, outage prediction models, expertise, experience. But at the end of the day, does anyone feel like we really have the perfect model or crystal ball to nail it every single time? I know I don't, in my experience. And if you do, I'd like to talk to you after the call. I'll be picking your brain. I recall a number of years ago, the first time I was kind of in the chair, if you will, running storm response here at Grid. And it was actually pretty similar weather to what I see outside my window today. We had big temperature swing from warm to cold, saturated ground, wind in the forecast, something that wouldn't normally be catastrophic for our system, but certainly could have some impacts. And, when my boss left and turned things over to me, it was one of those kind of keep an eye on it. I think we'll be okay, but make sure you watch it type of events. And it was maybe 48, 36 hours before the event. We got an updated weather forecast, and the wind direction had shifted a bit. Everything else was similar as far as wind speed and gusts, precipitation, temperatures, everything like that. But I got a call right after the forecast came out from one of the overhead line directors. Guy had 30 plus years in the company, probably 15 plus years in the role running storm response. He called me and said something along the lines of, when the winds are out of the north or the west, I was feeling pretty good. But now that it's shifted out of the east, I think we need to grab 100 crews. We had a similar event about 7 years ago. We really got hammered. And, I kind of recall taking back the stress of, having to make the staffing and pre-staging decisions, having to shift based on the forecast, right? The OPM was kind of contradicting what the experience in the room was telling me. And I remember thinking then, I wish we had better data to make decisions off of. Luckily, I trusted the experience, got the crews, and sure enough, we had a busy couple of days ahead of us after we got hammered from that event. So in the years since, I've been part of a lot of storms, and, usually we're pretty close with our prep. And National Grid, we take a lot of pride in that. But I've been on both sides of less than ideal decisions I've made that either delayed response for our customers or had us have some miss on pre-staging and spending some unnecessary money. So while it's not necessarily $1 million guess every single time, better data will help us all drive better decision making, right? So when we look at the impacts of this, right, regulatory financial penalties for lack of preparedness, fighting for resources across a region, and then the affordability of kind of false pre-staging are all things that we should keep in mind. And Matt, if you can go to the next slide. So just to set the stage, right, the reality that we all face is increased customer regulatory demand and scrutiny. We have to keep ourselves and challenge ourselves to keep improving. We need to move from this reactive kind of management, our outdated OPMs, right, high uncertainty, siloed data that's not really shared across the industry, into a better future for all of us, right, where we can have proactive management. We're using AI capabilities to reduce uncertainty, and we're merging our data and sharing it more broadly across the industry. Next slide, if you would, Matt. So we believe the solution, and I think really the star of today's webinar, hopefully you'll take away, like Jen said, kind of the exciting part that we'll get to in a bit. Adam will talk about it, is what's called the North American forecasting model, right? It's going to be using a combination of premier weather forecasting, publicly and utility sourced outage data, system modeling, and adaptive AI to be the best and most accurate OPM in North America, right? Benefits will drive from hyper-local modeling, allowing more strategic pre-staging of crews, better load forecasting, anonymous data pooling, right? Both system and outage impact data, and then AI forecasting looking forward. So I think one of the major benefits, right, that we need to talk about today, and one of the major benefits driving this project is affordability, right? I'm sure the affordability conversation is nothing new to most of you on this call, as it's the biggest challenge that we're facing industry-wide, right? We're constantly looking for ways to positively impact affordability for our customers. And having more accurate and dependable outage prediction means we can get the right number of crews at the right times to the right places, as close to where the damage occurs as possible, right? It's going to save us money on pre-staging. It's going to save us time on restoration, and it's going to help both with reliability and affordability, right? The more accurate outage prediction also allows us to make data-based decisions when it comes to storm planning and pre-staging, right? And I can't stress that enough. Having data to back up the decisions we're making is really going to offload the utilities. And this will allow for more transparent, consistent decision making, which helps us tell our story, build trust with our customers and our regulators. Right? In New York State alone, there have been north of $250 million in penalties levied by the regulators for storm response over the last decade. That's a big number. The model will also allow for better data-backed decisions around proactive planning and hardening measures, right? Being able to run simulations on possible weather scenarios, making investments in the right part of our systems is just spending our dollars better. In addition to the kind of, dollars and cents of it all, and when we talk about affordability, it'd be remiss not to acknowledge, right, the expectations and needs of our customers are higher than they've ever been. Right? Whether it's the shift to remote work, it's electrification of heat, it's EV adoption, it's data centers, right? All these things that are driving the load growth that we all talk about all the time are also driving the need for always on energy and driving down our customers' tolerance for weather-related outages. Right? We covered a bit earlier, I talked about better and more dependable prediction of outages, more granularity on the location of the damage will help not only reduce costs, but also the speed of our restoration efforts, and therefore improve customer sentiment, hopefully. The last point that I want to make about benefits of this project before I turn it over to Adam, it's really around building trust in an OPM. All right, so if you remember the story I told just a few minutes ago at the beginning of the presentation, right, that 30 plus years of experience helping to guide the decision I made about pre-staging, I'm not sure about all of you, but when I look around the rooms I'm in here, there's less and less of those 30 plus year vets to rely on. Right? There's less experience to draw from. There's less history, and that history was never written down. Having an accurate, dependable data to base decisions on in the future will be critical to the next generation success. And with that, if it's all right, Adam, I'll kick it over to you for kind of a deeper dive into the model itself, and we'll walk folks through that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Zach. And before I get into the model, just to add sort of my own experiences with what you were just mentioning, I think I was gonna mention the exact same thing. I mean, I think especially for utilities that span significant geographic areas, have different topography, different ways that the weather is going to impact our system, it's really hard to translate straight meteorological forecasts into impacts, into what does it really mean for us. And today, a lot of us use outage prediction models to do that. And the other aspect, like you said, is we rely on our experts who've been around for decades. And that's a dangerous proposition because that's an uncontrollable. Those folks are retiring, they're taking other jobs in the industry, they're leaving the industry, which means that expertise is walking out the door, and that puts the utility in a situation where you're leaving open a risk of being able to continue to perform the way that we need to. And I can speak for the areas that we're in. There's a large amount of regulatory scrutiny about how we respond to storms. We want to get it perfect. Our regulatory partners want us to get it perfect. Our customers want us to get it perfect every time, and that's difficult when you're dealing with an unknown like severe weather. But as Zach mentioned, having access to the best data possible gives us the best chance to be perfect, and that's what we strive for every day. So this is really an exciting opportunity, and with that, I'll turn into the model directly here. But we're you can stay on that side. Sorry, Matt, I threw off there with that hook. It's a very exciting time now, as was announced a couple of weeks ago in our winter spring WISR IAB meeting. The advisory board reviewed the proposal from the WISR consortium, the IUCRC, and decided to fund the North American Forecast Model Outage Damage and Load project in phase one. And it's a really exciting time to look at this from a national level. Many of us use sort of disparate siloed outage prediction models today that are utilizing data from a small area to forecast on a small area. But we know with AI and machine learning that more data is better. More data, more learning, better models, better experience for the model to determine what is going to come. And so this is an exciting first of its kind look at doing this across all of North America, starting in phases, and we're going to talk about sort of that growth, but looking at this holistically. The idea here is that this is going to be adaptive. right? We're not trying to, the Wiser team is not trying to tackle one aspect of outage prediction, but wanting to create an adaptive foundation to potentially innovate even further in future phases and future years. And we're going to leverage both public and private data sources to do that. And what I'll say just from a personal standpoint is I've worked with the folks, the expert scientists here from the University of Albany and UConn on building our own outage prediction model with some additional funding sources and help. And I will say that their expertise is unmatched. Their knowledge base in this is unmatched, and I think they've shown me through a couple of years of build out that they really know what they're doing. And so that's to Zach's point around trust, when you can sort of look a model in its face and see what's really going on behind the scenes, it does add to that trust factor. And I'll say I have that trust factor for the scientists who are going to be working on this. So I'm excited about that future. Next slide. So I started to touch upon this, and there's sort of a lot going on here in this slide. So I'm not going to hit on everything, but I think the really important things here are the ambitious but achievable project goal here is to develop this national model, taking a new look at this really critical system. We're going to the Wiser team is going to do that in multiple phases. So phase one is going to focus on the Northeast, particularly the NISO, ISO New England, and CAISO, the California ISO areas, and then expand out in future years. So that's, sort of when you pilot anything, you're going to start with a smaller area, get it right, and then look to expand. So that's the idea here with phase one deliverables occurring over the next 24 months as we continue to expand out. Now, you shouldn't be discouraged if you're a prospective member here or a potential new member and you're not in that area. I think there's certainly area for discussion and potential growth with the availability of data and your involvement to potentially grow that out further in areas that may be more relevant to you. So future conversations there offline if you're interested in joining and not in these areas. But the team is looking to grow in future years. So this isn't just a one and done. We want to make this a national model when it's all said and done. There's a lot of technical science that's going to go into this, combining both the weather science as well as the outage science. But we'll get into that a little bit further here in a couple of slides. Next slide. So just to zoom in real quick into these areas again, where phase one is going to focus. So again, ISO New England, the NISO, and CAISO as the main areas of focus in phase one, with an expansion in future years as we continue the research forward. Next slide. As I just started mentioning, really in phase one, we're trying to take the research. I keep saying we, like I want to be a part of the scientist team here because I'm just so impressed with them. But the scientists who are going to be building this are going to be taking two major components and combining them. So first in phase one is looking at what are the right weather parameters, right weather models to start to feed a model of this type that hasn't been done before, as well as looking at outage data to start to combine and create the learning data set for the AI to start to build this out as a workable product. Initially, from a outage data perspective, it's going to combine publicly available data through Eagle Eye and through that program, as well as some proprietary data that utilities have already provided these researchers, like Avangrid, through other projects or through the Wiser IUCRC directly. So taking both public and private data, combining it with the latest and greatest weather science out there to start to create the foundation that will be this national model in the long run. Next slide.
And actually, yeah, Adam, I just wanted to validate your point. I think it is we, because as you know, all the industry is very involved and actually are participating members in the project. So I'm going to support the we pronoun.
All right. Thanks for the Thanks for a little bit of rope there to keep using that.
Here's scientist for the day, Adam.
Yeah, there you go. I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night, so I think I got a doctorate. So, I started mentioning some of this already, but for the members or attendees here today who may not be as familiar with UAlbany and UConn as I am, we'll get into some of the expertise a little bit later when we talk about Wiser generally. But there's a lot of benefit to partnering with and leveraging both the scientific expertise at these universities, but also the investments that the universities have been making on supercomputing. And that's something that we're already leveraging as a company in trying to improve our operations. But there's been a lot of investment by these universities to create the computing foundation that's necessary to run a model like this and to do this sort of research. And so excited to leverage that again in another way through the help of NSF and the Wiser membership. Next slide.
So we have a break slide for Q&A. We did have we had some comments that basically there was one comment that was talking about that that commenter was not aware of any model that gets it right every time, and I'm pretty sure that we could agree with that. But Adam and Zach, do you have any comments on models of the past or models of the future, or thoughts on models not getting it right every time?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I can maybe go first, and Zach, if you have anything to add, I think right is a relative term, right? I don't know that we're ever going to predict. I mean, I'd love a model to be dead on in outage, to a T. But I think getting it in the right ballpark, both from a number perspective, but then also a geographic location perspective, is really important for us, especially for utilities like Avangrid that span multiple states, large states with a pretty large service territory. We have to pre-deploy crews into specific areas so that when the sky's clear, we can go to work as efficiently as possible and start restoring services. If we put the crews in the wrong spot, we know that we're taking hours to redeploy them. We're losing valuable working time for those crews before they have to rest again. All of that starts to slow down the process. So we want to get our crews, the right amount of crews, into the right spots before we get hit before, so that we can be as efficient as possible. And so that's, I think, for me in the industry, the most important thing when I'm thinking about an outage prediction model.
Yeah, I think Adam nailed it. I am disappointed to hear that nobody has a crystal ball on the call that we could borrow from time to time. So I'll have to sit with that for the rest of the afternoon. But I do take a lot of optimism, right, from this project that's been funded and is moving forward. That exactly what Adam said, right? Let's not let improvement be the enemy of perfection, right? We don't have perfection, but at the end of the day, if we can get that improvement both in location, severity of outages, right, knowing sooner, right, where we're going to have that damage to be able to pre-stage, like Adam talked about, is absolutely massive. And the more granular we can get on the areas where that damage is going to occur, right, particularly if you think about things like blizzards or ice, sometimes in our geographic area where there's lake effect snow, right, you can get completely blocked out of an area, and 10 miles on either side of it is completely clear, right? So knowing kind of where the impacts are going to be, it makes a huge difference for us in being able to get the response right.
Oh, great. Thanks, Zach. And then we've got a few other questions as well. So, again, one of them is around lead time of the forecast that we're looking into. And we are looking into both short-term and medium-term lead times that can be, days and weeks. But I don't know, Zach and Adam, if you have any thoughts on, the critical lead time that from your perspectives. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at this one first. I mean, as always, and I bet we would all be in agreement, the sooner the better, particularly for large scale events, regional events, right? That we call it the run at the bank, right? Where people are trying to secure the same resources and you're trying to make sure, right, that for the good of the entire region, they're getting to the right areas as well, right? You're trying to look out for your customers, but also for the customers of our peer utilities. The sooner we know and have more granularity on how severe the weather is going to be and the outage impacts, the better. And the more firm those forecasts are. So I think that's the first place to start.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the sooner the better for sure. But there's usually a moving day, right? Somewhere in the 48 to 72 hour range, depending on the type of hazard you're looking at, is when you're really trying to make decisions, because we're all making decisions in that point. And especially in the Northeast, we're all, as Zach said, competing for the same resources. And so if you're the last one to the dance, you're pulling crews even further away. So that, I think, to me, is the most important timeline. An outage prediction model that's accurate 5 minutes before the event of the start is not helpful to me. I could have just waited to see the impact, at that point. But getting it accurate early enough that we can make the right decisions is the most important thing for us.
Great. There was a question that was regarding service level agreements on uptime and availability of this model. And that's probably something I can answer, which is, we're really we're not selling software at this point. We're really, what we're doing is designing and building capability. And so this is really in the first phase of doing the analytics that would support a model that could be commercialized. Again, and for what Wiser does, just to clarify for the audience, we do what I would call operationally ready research. So this research could be commercialized by any Wiser member and potentially others if need be, or adopted by Wiser members or others who are part of this. There's another question. So there's basically, there's a few. One was asking about some of the latency of the data regarding Eagle Eye, and I think that there is some latency with Eagle Eye, but because it's available, it allows us to actually build the model today. And Zach and Adam, you can stop me if you have any comments on any of those. But those are some of the other questions.
No, I think maybe we can provide a little bit of context. We're going to get into Wiser here now. Maybe they'll provide a little bit more context into what we're talking about.
Yeah. So we can move forward.
All right. So as Jan mentioned, Wiser, and I'm not going to go through the acronym because I'm sorry, Jan, I have to Google it every time I go to use it in this long form.
Just go with weather in the energy industry.
Yeah, perfect. Wiser is an IUCRC, as Jan said. It's an industry university collaborative research center that's developing research and operational ready research to improve how we operate in the industry. And from my perspective, it's a great opportunity to connect the researchers, the experts in the how these things work, and it's not even just outage prediction modeling, but there's a lot of really interesting research going on, both on energy delivery, energy generation, impacts to particular, disparate population centers, things like that, in the arenas that we operate within. So really, really, really interesting research, but connects those experts with folks in the industry to say, hey, I really think you should be looking at this, or let me tell you how what you're looking at is going to play into how I operate day in and day out. And that connection is really invaluable to making sure that the research is being driven in the direction that's going to make the most positive change for us in the industry, who are living this life every day. I was going to say Monday through Friday, but we know in this industry it's not Monday through Friday. It's 7 days a week. So living this. So right now, Wiser has 12 industry members who are actively, engaged in this, actively dues paying members of the IUCRC. It began in 2024, really in earnest. So we're into our third year now. But Avangrid is obviously a member, as well as Central Hudson, Con Ed, National Grid, hence Zach, NYPA in New York, Eversource, NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, NYSTAR, PG&E in California, Hydro-Quebec, SCE, obviously also in California, and NASA are all members today. And I'll go through a little bit more detail here in a second, but the North American model is a really exciting component of Wiser, but there is more to everything that Wiser is doing and what being a member of Wiser really gets you. So next slide. So as I just started mentioning, the research thrust areas, the main focus areas of Wiser today are really in four categories: renewable energy, both generation and movement of that energy; outage management, which we spent quite a bit of time talking about today; grid resiliency generally. So that's not only just how does the grid hold up to severe weather components, but other aspects like extreme heat events, extreme cold events, climate impacts, so future impacts of grid resiliency to inform future grid planning, and that's really the fourth area. So it's really holistically looking at how we operate the grid and that, again, that research for tomorrow to help us make the correct decisions today for our future planning. Next slide. As I started mentioning, so UAlbany and UConn are really it's really a match, I think, made in heaven between these two areas. Both have their own levels of expertise, and I won't go through all of these, but I think feel free to read through these as I'm talking, as well as after we conclude the webinar. But they both have their own areas of expertise and bring their own scientific experts to the table for these research initiatives. So when Wiser, when the IAB is looking to approve research projects, sometimes you'll see ones that are targeted in areas that are expertise at UAlbany. Sometimes you'll see ones that are areas of expertise at UConn. What I really particularly like seeing is when they come together, bring their expertises together across the higher ed boundaries, and start to leverage those into new and novel projects and initiatives. And there's crossover where they're teaming up on something where both university centers are experts in, but then there's really interesting ways of connecting individual expertise into really interesting research projects. Again, not research for research sake so much as it is how is it either directly tying into an operational component, or how is it going to inform another initiative that's going to end up turning into an operational component of how we operate. So it's like I said earlier, it's a really exciting crucible for combining that expertise in the science and the operational expertise that the advisory board brings to the table. So just a quick overview of this year, as well as sort of to give a flavor, I think, of what being a member looks like from an annual component perspective. Like I mentioned, we met in our we'll call it a winter session. I'm optimistic to say it's spring already, but it's been warm in New York for a couple of days, so I'm feeling pretty spring. But we met in February at our IAB meeting, and that February meeting is where the researchers bring their proposals for that year's funding opportunities to the table. The IAB reviews them and determines, based on the number of members and the available money, what research should be approved for funding in that year. So that occurred in early February. Right now, with these webinars, as well as some other announcements, we're really launching this North American model and beginning the first phases of that progress. If you've never been involved in an IUCRC and the research is done, when you approve research, you end up assigning mentors to that research to make sure that the researchers can check in with individuals who are interested. It's not mandatory that you're a mentor on a research project, but if it's something that you're interested in or your company is particularly interested in, it's really nice to be involved along the process of that research. So we'll assign mentors to research projects. and the researchers, the PIs on these research, will check in with those mentors periodically throughout the year to make sure that they're aligning on either deliverables or aligning on maybe questions the researcher may have, the PI may have about how they should be going about it, sharing data, and providing results. So there's always check-ins throughout the year. One of those major ones is we get the whole IAB and the researchers together in the summer at UConn to take a look at how things are going, get a status update, and take a look at the general thrust of the IUCRC to make sure we're looking at the right things. The researchers are starting to think about the next projects and starting to develop the proposals for the next year's voting in the following February. So that mid-year check-in is really important just to make sure we all stay on the same track, and the proposals that end up in front of the IAB in the next year align with what the IAB wants to see. And then that will continue throughout the year as we begin finalizing projects, seeing the deliverables come to fruition and tail down the current year's proposals into the next year. So that's just a little bit of a flavor for how what a membership looks like on a 12-month basis. So as I started to allude to a little bit earlier, there's a lot of benefits to being a member in Wiser. One is leveraging research dollars. If anyone, I know we do a large amount of R&D and innovation in Avangrid, but it can be very expensive to start a research project from the beginning. There can be a lot of overheads, especially if you start to partner with universities. The beauty of Wiser and IUCs generally are being able to connect all of those dollars, all of those memberships together. And with Wiser in particular, leveraging funding from NSF to help cover some of those overheads and some of those other costs, and really putting our dollars to use into direct research that is going to deliver the deliverables we want to see to improve how we perform. You're getting access to all the talent I just mentioned previously at the higher ed level, and these research scientists and all of the PhDs and experts that go into pushing these proposals forward. We're sharing any of the risk for R&D. So just as we're leveraging our dollars in a positive way, we're also providing some mitigation to the financial investment through membership here. We're avoiding some of those other costs that may be associated with doing research on our own or partnering directly with a university, one industry member to a university. You're getting access to the network of utility members. So I always learn a ton at our IAB in-person meetings from other members, especially members who are outside of the geographic areas that we operate. Right. I can't speak for everyone who's in attendance, but I can, certainly for us in this region, we meet a lot as a group, utilities within our region, but we don't meet a lot with utilities in other areas outside of, national conferences and things like that. So it's a good opportunity to get to know experts in these other companies and get to ask the questions that you may be thinking about for the first time that they've maybe been thinking about for a decade. And then lastly, and this is certainly not least, being a member gives you access to royal-free, non-exclusive access to the intellectual property that's performed by the center. So because you're a member, you get access to the IP that comes out of all of the research and development that Wiser is doing. Next slide. So a membership, a single membership at Wiser is $50,000 per year. But as I sort of already mentioned, that $50,000 is very well spent when you start to consider all the positive aspects that go into it and all of the costs that you've avoided. So just to add into what I just said, so that $50,000 membership is, if you think about it from a cost benefit analysis, is pretty small compared to all the benefits that I just sort of laid out in the last slide. Next slide. There are other voting options available to members, and certainly if you have further questions on this, you can reach out to Jan and Matt and the team after this, or Jan can probably answer some of the questions when we get to the Q&A here in a second. But $50,000 gives a member company or IAB member one voting right in IAB voting sessions. If you want to invest $100,000 a year, you get 2 voting rights, and 150 doesn't get you any more voting rights, but it does add to the pool of research dollars to fund and drive these research projects forward. When we vote at sessions, IAB members will rank their proposed projects in a 1 to 5 rating, and that weighting is rated here on the slide, so you can get a sense. So what we try to do as an IAB is ensure that any IAB member who wants to vote for a research project as their most important project they want to see forward, we try our best to make sure that ends up getting funded at the end of the day, because we want to make sure that our IAB members are represented and they're getting what they want to out of this initiative. So there's always some negotiation if you've ever been a part of an IAB before, but some negotiation and conversation in closed door sessions to make sure we end up with the right grouping of initiatives for that year at the end of the day. But we are a very collaborative IAB, and want to make sure that everyone who is a member is getting what they want to out of the IUCRC. Next slide. And that's it for me.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. So we actually, so there's a couple things just on housekeeping. We will be sending you information if we have your email. But if you don't, you can email Jan or Matt, and our email information is there. We will be sharing this presentation with you, sending it to you if we have your email, which I believe we do. And then the other part is, there have been a few other questions. One of the questions was around, how frequently we'll be running the model. And so, again, if this is going to be in an operational setting, the the model will be run, as needed. But for the updates, there would be the updating of the model will continue to be improved, and so the model will be updated as it is, as new capabilities are identified. There was another question, which really was asking for a comment on the availability and accessibility of historical outage data sets for training. And that's what I think Adam and Zach had covered earlier, which really talks about how we are not only using some publicly available data, which is Eagle Eye, but also proprietary data from our industry members. And so that's really the big differentiator here, is that this is a kind of a North American industry-wide initiative. And so that data set is very powerful. Are there any other questions? Because those are the questions there. Let me ask you, Adam and Zach, from your perspective, within the energy industry right now, do you see a kind of a mind shift at all? And if you do, what is kind of a mind shift within the industry from, the past to today's issues?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be able to go first, because I think what I'm seeing, especially over the past, I say 12 or 18 months, maybe time flies here, but as AI, ChatGPT, Copilot have become more part of the mainstream thinking in society, there's definitely been a move at Avangrid, and I suspect this is true with many utilities, to start to figure out how to leverage that more holistically. Right? At the end of the day, I feel like for a long time, storm responses would always end up on a whiteboard somewhere, right? At some point, no matter all the fancy tools and systems and all that sort of stuff, at some point it ends up on a whiteboard in an office where you're tracking incidents and crews and phone numbers and all of that sort of thing. And I think I'm starting to see an acceptance that that's not the long-term model, and that we really do need to embrace AI holistically, both from an outage perspective, but I think also how we manage our crews and how we manage tickets and how we manage restoration priorities and all of that, and sort of figuring out the ways we can leverage those tools holistically in our response. Outage prediction is one of those areas, but I think it's a larger conversation going on in the industry.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, Adam. Just around probably the biggest shift right now, Jen, is just technology in general. So like AI certainly is a huge piece of it, and we're trying to wrestle and kind of navigate with where we fit in and where AI fits in with us. But I think just that technological shift in general, right, moving away from paper and starting to adapt digital tools and technologies to compile right the efficiencies that we're looking to achieve in the interest of affordability. I mean, that's really I think from the conversations that I'm a part of, both here at Grid as well as industry wide, like that affordability question is probably the biggest piece that we're constantly wrestling with right now.
Okay. Yeah. So AI, affordability, tech changes. Yeah. There is another question that was really around the model that's being developed, and is it available to all Wiser members for testing and commercialization or market distribution? And so the answer to that question is that yes, all Wiser members have access to the intellectual property and can use it to their how they want. But uh, that's and Zach and Adam, you're more than willing to comment on that. But the other question I wanted to ask, um, that there's, some utilities have, well, data quality has a wide spectrum of well, it varies from company to company, not only data quality, but metadata that describes the data. And so there may be some hesitancy from others to join, thinking that they need to clean their data. And so I don't know if you two have a perspective on data, but I know that you're aware. So at Wiser, we are actually part of what we will be doing is actually data management as well. But do you guys have any thoughts on, data quality and how the model might uh, might help or hinder your data capabilities?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first on this one. I think one of the things that we're learning here as we get more into AI and learning models like this is, the data doesn't have to be perfect, right? Data to feed into the model helps it learn. So, I think none of us have perfect data, at least not that I've seen and anyone I've talked to. So two things. One, the more data that we can get from the industry, that proprietary data, the better, and the better the model is going to be. And the other bit, and Adam touched on this earlier, is right. The scientists and researchers at UAlbany and UConn are fantastic at what they do. And, like Jan just said, they're going to help kind of manage that data and help to train the model.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I just I can add one thing is this is a very data heavy industry at the core of it, right? There are millions of assets, especially if you're a larger utility over a larger area, every pole, every transformer, every substation, everything has all of these data points. And so we're always trying to figure out a way to improve that and leverage that data for understanding asset health and understanding reliability and fragility and all of that, ultimately feeding into investments and feeding into understanding outage prediction. And we're always trying to improve upon that. But as Zach and Jan said, I think coming together and bringing that data in is the most valuable thing. And if I can give a nod to the collaboration within the center, it's another reason to become a member and talk to other similar folks in the area and figure out what they're doing to improve upon their data or what their processes look like, because we always learn. I know every time I talk to any of the members, I always learn a little bit about something that they're doing that we can start doing, we can invest in. So just because your data is not perfect, no one's data is perfect, but we're all trying to do it better. So
Right. Thank you very much. And there's another question, and after that we will wrap it up. But it asks about NASA's participation and if they would also have access to the model. And of course, so NASA is a member, so they will have access to the model, and their contribution is envisioned to be. Certainly their access to a lot of the satellite networks will be very helpful to this model. But I don't see any other questions. So, gentlemen, if you do you want to make maybe a last comment on what you think one important thing to take away from this discussion is for the audience?
I
Do
think
you-
if I'll go first and I'll take Zach's one thing to take away. But I think the one thing for me if to take away is this is a really exciting time for Wiser. I know a lot of the IEB left that meeting in January with a smile on their face, feeling like we're going in the right direction and excited for the time to come. Um, I really encourage other possible members to think about coming and joining us. And if you have any questions, certainly reach out to Jen or Matt, but you can certainly reach out to myself or Zach as well if you want an industry view into the IEB. So looking forward to possibly gaining some new members and growing the expertise we already have.
That's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. And I'll just add on to that. I think, right now and today, the focus, right, and kind of the emphasis of today's webcast was on the forecasting model, right? It was the problem we set up at the beginning and what you spent the majority of the time talking through. And that's really driving a lot of the excitement right now is around that model and funding of phase one of it. But I don't think that we could downplay or short sell just the benefits of being a Wiser member in general, right? What you covered, right? The industry connections and collaboration, right? Being able to have a positive influence on the academic focus areas, kind of that cost multiplier that we breeze through a little bit. I think like anyone who's ever done, partnered research with university knows how costly that it can be. And this is a really great way to influence that, to have your voice heard, to get the projects that you want and believe in getting sponsored at an absolute, kind of bargain basement price between that NSF funding and everything else you get from it. So I think we kind of glazed over that towards the end. Hopefully everyone was still zoned in when that part was gone through. But I think that for me is, you take anything away. Yeah, the forecasting model is super exciting. We're all really, really looking forward to that maturing. But the other benefits of being in Wiser are equally as exciting.
Yeah. And by the way, we are doing other projects as well that we haven't talked about here. But all right, well, gentlemen, Zach and Adam, thank you so much for this exciting talk. This was very compelling, and I enjoyed it, and I know that the audience has enjoyed it. And we looks like I've seen a couple of emails come through on my email box as well, so that's good. So all right, so I think that's it. We can wrap this up unless you guys have some final comments at all.
No, just thank you for putting it together.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jen. Appreciate it.